don't get me wrong. It's not because I just hate Americans or anything like that. And then, why I say this? Before I tell you that, let me introduce myself for those who are new to my channel. Hi, I'm Nobita. I was born and raised in Chiba, which is in Kanto area and really close to Tokyo. And as you can see, this guy is extremely cringy and probably the most awkward guy in Japan.
Do you find me attractive?
You?
Do you find me attractive? I need to be honest. Sorry, awkward.
No.
How could you say that? How about you?
No.
No?
So this guy seems just stupid. Why should you listen to him? But because of my previous work and the US military in my town, I have quite many American friends, not just in Japan, but in the US as well. I would say 60% of my foreign friends happen to be from the US. So going back, why I tell you this? It's not because so many Americans are fat, lazy, loud, too sensitive, and so obnoxious. I know those are not true, but based on my experience at least, I have to say that they are not compatible with this country in so many ways, which means they're gonna have a harder time, possibly more than other foreigners, but it's totally not their fault. Imagine you went on a date with a beautiful woman and you enjoyed it a lot. She's kind, caring, funny, and extremely attractive, having all the qualities you look for in a girlfriend. But at the end of the day, she tells you this, and you fall into the friend zone. Honestly, how many times did it happen to you? But does it always mean you suck as a guy, so it's all your fault? Of course not. Sometimes you are just not compatible with her. So let me say my point again. Americans are just not compatible with Japan in so many ways. Of course, not all Americans, and I talked about the advantage for them a few months ago. But to be fair, let me share the possible downside. I want you to take like this. If you move to Japan, you're gonna lose a lot of benefits that you have in the US, and it could lower your happiness level significantly. Every time I say that, so many weeaboos disagree though. What are you talking about? I must get tons of benefits, right? It must be much more than in the US. But in reality, maybe America has more benefits actually. Anyway, these are the things you should consider before moving to Japan. So under the Japanese law, anyone having multiple nationality has to pick only one before the age of 22, and that's why she only has a Japanese passport now and had to give up American one. I know, maybe it's not gonna be an issue for you, but what if you get married in Japan and even have kids? Today, over 900,000 people hold multiple citizenship in this country. But those people are going to lose the huge benefit soon and have to choose either solely becoming Japanese or foreigner. And once you became a foreigner, the people and the government can treat you completely differently in a negative way. Even if you are born and raised in Japan. Actually, even if you became a Japanese citizen, would people treat you as a Japanese person? Really? Unless you look Japanese and speak fluent Japanese. Maybe most people still see you as a foreigner. Anyway, this might affect you a lot, but nothing you can do about it, unfortunately. So regarding the reason, the Japanese government explains like this, which I kinda get. And maybe because we don't allow it, we don't have many conflicts between different ethnicities or race. So for Japan, it could be a big benefit. But I would worry about Americans moving here, because in the US, it's really common, so Japan might be totally different for you. I know, Japan has a great transportation, but you might actually need a car depending on your area or job. Who knows, maybe you're gonna end up living in a countryside like this, which is not a bad thing. But no worries, right? If you already have a driving license in your country, you just need switching that to a Japanese one, which would be no big deal. That's actually true if you are from any of these countries. But as you can see, the United States is not on the list, which means you have to obtain a driving license from scratch. Unless you are from either of these though. Can you imagine how difficult this would be if you don't speak Japanese well or don't have any translator? Trust me, it's already so difficult. Even Japanese people fail many times. Now maybe that's because we are Asians, right?
That's racist!
Anyway, I feel really sorry for any foreigners who have to go through it. But on a second thought, maybe it's gonna be a great experience and you enjoy it a lot. I guess you can take it positively like that. But this is something many Americans feel different about because Japan is way more strict. Just possessing that, you could be in jail for 5 years. If you got caught growing that, it could be 7 years. Even medical use is not allowed yet, not just personal one. Even though study after study suggests it's actually safer than smoking or alcohol. Now, I'm not saying we should be totally open about that, but isn't weird? Japan is totally tolerant about drinking, and people do that all the time, even during the pandemic, but so harsh on marijuana or any other illegal drugs. So if you're from America or Canada, you should be really careful about that in Japan. The same goes to this. It's totally accepted in the most states of the US, but still not allowed in Japan socially, because it reminds us Yakuza, which means you could be instantly perceived like a scary, violent, or dangerous person. Also, it was used as a punishment back in the days. So having a tattoo means you committed a crime. People assumed like that. And even today, the stigma is still strong. Maybe you can't go to many places where you wanna go because the business owner worries you might scare other customers. I know, Japan seems so discriminatory in terms of that, but as someone who grew up in Japan, I honestly feel scared a little bit every time I see a person with a tattoo because I just can't stop this in my mind, even though I know I should stop that. I know, the Yakuza is actually getting less and less common to see nowadays. So why do I feel scared, right? But the stigma still does remain. Maybe it's even getting worse.
すごい厳しいなとは思います。今特に昔はですね、必要な悪って言われてたんですけど、まあこれだけその活動ができなくなってくると必要悪じゃなくなってきた部分がすごく大きいんですよ。ヤクザとつるむことによってもう自分のその生活自体も苦しくなる。要はヤクザじゃない人たちがね。
Anyway, changing the social attitude against tattoos can be extremely difficult for Japan. Maybe it takes more decades. To be fair though, it's more and more accepted, at least among the younger generation. And at the end of the day, it's not illegal. Of course not. And there are still some places you can go to. So as a tourist, maybe it's not gonna be an issue. But as a resident, I'm not sure about that. Like working for a company or making friends can be extremely difficult. Speaking of which, I know this is not necessary, but you might experience, right? So if you say you are American, maybe people see you positively and you have easier time. But my concern would be that a lot of Japanese women have expectations. He must be handsome, muscular, and extremely attractive like these guys. The same goes to Japanese men towards American women. Many Japanese imagine like these people, just like weeaboos have unrealistic expectations towards Japan, just based on anime. Many Japanese do the same based on the Hollywood movies or celebrities. So when you meet someone through a dating app or something, you might disappoint them a lot because you are not like Tom Cruise.
So much of the Hollywood filter when it comes to what Japan sees about the United States is filtered through, oh, well, these people are very friendly and charismatic and they look really good. And then when they finally actually see, you know, regular people from the United States, it's like, oh, you're actually like that? And it's frustrating. And I'll just come out and say it. I might be making a mountain out of a molehill here, but one of the things that I'm actually worried about as an American, either moving to Japan or even just visiting Japan, is how people in Japan are going to view me as a foreigner in the case of COVID.
That's what I also worry about. When you say you came from America, how would Japanese feel? You guessed it, you might face a lot of discrimination in Japan, just like hate crime against Asians is on the rise in the US. Because people have a fear about getting the virus from Asians. The same goes to the people in Japan. They might worry a lot. Americans will spread the virus in Japan because we do see news like this. Now, I said earlier, Japan had a positive image on the US because of the Hollywood movies. But I have to take it back because nowadays it's getting worse and worse. Again, we constantly see news like that, so how could we have any positive impression? To be fair, it's not just Japan, but many other countries have a negative impression on the US. Actually, any foreigners coming to Japan, probably people are not so welcome. But I would say, especially Americans, they might be the last foreigners Japanese want in the same country now. Okay, let's forget about the virus. even aside from that, communicating with people can be too difficult. Now, I'm not talking about language barrier. It doesn't matter you speak Japanese or not, because people don't speak clearly or directly, and you have to read their mind. Don't worry, I'm not saying you need to fly in the sky or freeze time like this. I know any humans can't do that, but you just need a mind reader.
Son of a bitch is thinking in Japanese.
Okay, joking aside, you need a lot of guessing, which we call 空気を読む, reading the air. That doesn't exist in the US because many people have different backgrounds, ethnicities, or thoughts. So you have to say that out with words. It's only possible in Japan or country that is homogeneous and collective as a society. America is opposite. It's diverse and individualistic.
When you go to Japan, you're gonna have to learn how to kukyoyomu. You're gonna have to learn how to mind read people a little bit because no one is gonna come straight out unless you're like drunk or you're hanging out with your boys, and it's gonna take you a while before you actually develop friendships to the point of being the boys. That's actually very problematic for Americans. That's very problematic for people coming in from the United States, is because we wear our thoughts and emotions on our sleeve.
So when we want to say no, we often say, あ、それはちょっと. That literally means, well, that's a bit. And this actually means clearly no in most cases. And people assume you are easily able to get that. As we say, 1を知って10を知る. Here 1, no 10. So my grandma said this when I was younger, when it comes to communicating with people in Japan, which I totally agree. It's heavily based on context and subtle gesture. That can be a big issue, especially if you work with Japanese people, because you can't get what they really want. The only way you can get this ability is having a lot of interactions with natives, watching Japanese TV shows, or observing their tendency on a daily basis. And then you are finally able to get this ability. But I would say the biggest difficulty in Japan would be this. Now some people say Japan is conservative, but it's more like risk adverse and afraid of changing ourselves or something that already exists. Now that can be a positive thing, of course, but when I think about the United States, the culture tells you the opposite. So the people are generally much more spontaneous, adventurous, and risk takers, like starting a business. So of course, when they move to Japan, they're gonna feel restricted a lot.
Japan Inc. is extremely slow to change how they communicate or do business in general. I cannot tell you how many meetings I've been in where I can see they clearly agree with our proposal to help them communicate with international style, but they don't want to be the ones to decide a new style of communication or even to work with a new company instead of the same Japanese advertising agency that they've worked with for the last 50 years, even though they know that the results they're getting are terrible. This means often business decisions are being made not based on merit, but on existing relationships. The fact that startups in Japan are essentially non-existent is another example of this, because it is still preferred to become a corporate soldier, called a salaryman, at a massive Japanese company like Honda, Mitsubishi, or Panasonic, instead of taking the risk of starting your own business or working out a startup. Because everyone views startups negatively or as too risky.
When it comes to social issues in Japan, these have been issues for many years, sometimes even decades, but still have to remain. I'm not saying nothing has been improving, but usually it's really slow, because many people or businesses have a strong resistance to change. I know, Japan surely has many great traditions and culture. I do not want them to change. But it doesn't mean we can't change anything forever and take no risk. It would be great if the people are a little bit more flexible and open to new idea or change, so the country can get better and better.
Japanese people can't accept change. But I think I can understand why, because living here for 6 years has made me realize, wow, being in Japan is so comfortable. Like, I don't want to go anywhere else. If I have the opportunity to travel around, I don't mind just traveling around Japan. I am already contented because everything is just so comfortable. That's why I guess that's one big reason why a lot of Japanese people don't like change, because they're so comfortable with what they have now.
Now at this point, you already know why I say this, right? It's not because Americans are bad and ruin our country or anything like that. But as you know, Japan is opposite to the US culturally and socially, so they just don't match. Of course, that's not always a bad thing. It actually makes Japan interesting. So I always tell my American friends this. You got to visit Japan after the virus was over, of course, but don't move to Japan. You see, take Japan only as a tourist country. Don't even think about moving here. That's my biggest advice. But let me clarify, despite of all the things I said, it does not mean you can't move to Japan and it's definitely a bad idea for everyone. Of course not. There are definitely some Americans who are totally happy in this country, as well as Americans who are not. So at the end of the day, it totally depends on the individual.